Well, good morning to everyone in Australasia. Of course, I'm in the Lone Star State here in the United States, and it's late in the afternoon for me. But for you folks, you're just getting your wake-up call. What a great way to wake up to talk about one of Mannatech's best, absolutely best products. This is a product where if you look at your label there in Australasia, the label tells you almost nothing. And with what we're allowed to say through TGA, etc., the marketing materials don't tell you a whole bunch either. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about benefits more than features, because marketing literature shows you features, sometimes benefits, but we're going to talk more about benefits and the way it works and that sort of thing. The one thing that does show up on your label is 200 milligrams of diosgenin, and this is pretty important stuff, because that's certainly not the whole deal, but that is that's the stuff that makes everything different about Plus versus literally any other product that we have in the Manitech inventory. So on your label it says Dioscorea villosa extract, 200 milligrams, and talking about that's in each tablet. Now, what is Dioscorea villosa? Well, it is one of more than 600 different varieties of Dioscorea. I mean, a lot of people don't know that there are so many different variations of what is often referred to as the wild yam. And I'm not sure, by the way, how you folks down there refer to this particular vegetable. In the United States, we have something that we call a sweet potato, and unfortunately, Americans also call them yams. Well, they're not yams. They are potatoes. And so I don't know if you folks have that same vegetable down there or not, but just if you do, don't get those confused. So a wild yam is not a potato, and it's not related to a potato in any way. So then, this particular version of Dioscorea, the Dioscorea villosa, has been researched since the 1950s, believe it or not. Research began in the late 1950s into a plant called red clover, because red clover had in it some plant sterols, and I'll explain to you what plant sterols mean in a moment. It had some plant sterols in it that the scientists who were doing the research, they thought, the molecular structure of this stuff it's not the same as human hormone, but it's got a lot of crossovers, and maybe we could use this to help people with hormone problems. So they began their research into red clover. Didn't work out quite as well as they wanted it to, and then their next step in research was looking into this really ugly, nasty, bitter-tasting plant called Dioscorea villosa. And if you were to look at Dioscorea villosa, the wild plant itself, you'd probably go, yuck, nobody'd want to eat that. Well, in fact, our ancient ancestors did eat wild yam, and they ate it probably because maybe some ancient medicine man or witch doctor, depending on, what continent they were on, probably discovered by accident that when you ate that plant, it did some pretty amazing things for your body and your mind. And so it became something that in various continents of the world, the Dioscorea plant began to be consumed by our ancient ancestors. And of course, they didn't know exactly what was in there, and it tastes awful, and it's an ugly looking thing. And so, they just did it because they were probably directed by the medicine man or the wise man or whatever the name was in the various tribes on the various continents, that, this is something that you eat. And especially the women in the tribe have to eat this, and they have to eat it every month. Okay. So that's kind of how the researchers, looking at historical data, because very, very often, people don't realize this, but very often pharmaceutical drugs have their origin in ancient medicine and ancient tribal medicine, where the researchers will be looking for anything they can find that might help in a particular way. Because as Paracelsus, and Paracelsus, by the way, is considered to be the father of modern pharmacology, even though he lived many centuries ago. He was a brilliant Swiss professor, doctor, etc. And he said that everything the human body needs can be found in nature. And he was right, because up until the time of Paracelsus, where they started trying to make formulations in a man-made way, previous to that, everything really was what today would be called naturopathy, and that is to use natural plant sources to help support your health. In fact, the man who's considered to be the father of medicine, Hippocrates, and in many countries, medical doctors will take the Hippocratic Oath, which starts with "do no harm." And so Hippocrates really was a naturopath, because what he did is he looked at nature. What might this plant do? What might this stone do? What might this food do? And he wrote the first sort of a medical text, I guess, back in his day, so like 2,400 years ago. Well, fast forwarding to the time of ancient Rome, you have another Greek physician. His name was, get this, Pedanius Dioscorides. And it is from Dioscorides that we get the name Dioscorea. Well, Dioscorides actually wrote the first real, honest-to-goodness medical textbook, where he would say, this is the symptom, this is what you take, and this is how it works. And that was called the Materia Medica, in Latin, of course. And so he started testing plant sources to find out what various plants and animal stuff, he tested animal stuff as well, to find out what various animal things might do for people. And he did most of his tests on Roman soldiers because he was a physician to the Roman army. And one of the things that he tested was this nasty, ugly plant called Dioscorea. And he found that it did some pretty interesting things. All right, now we fast forward to the 1950s. Scientists have tested red clover. Now they are testing Dioscorea villosa, or what is commonly referred to in North America as the Mexican wild yam, which, by the way, does not just grow exclusively in Mexico. I should pass that on to you. But that's the current sort of common name. So then they do the research and they find out that there are some what are known as plant sterols in this plant that have some pretty remarkable molecular structures. Again, not the same as human hormone, because it should be obvious to anyone who just thinks for a moment, plants and humans aren't just a little different, we are very, very, very different, okay? So obviously it's not human hormone, so get that one out of your head right away. But what they did find is that with these molecular structures, these early scientists thought that perhaps there was a potential to use these plant sterols to enhance the function of hormones in human beings if they were to extract them correctly and stabilize and standardize them correctly. They thought we might have real potential here. And they were right. In fact, it was the early research into Dioscorea villosa that led to the very first birth control pill. Now, I don't want anybody don't be an absolutist. You've heard me say this all the time, that I try and avoid absolutes. I want you to try and avoid absolutes. This doesn't mean that if you take plus, that you'll never be able to get pregnant, okay? What we know about these plant sterols, and understand plant sterol is that's the accurate way. And by the way, I should also tell all of you, I think the safest possible way, I'm thinking about regulators now, okay, in describing this. There have been in the past, unfortunately, we've gone through a lot of generations of marketing people and so on over our more than 20-year history. And in the past, we've had people refer to the plant sterols from Dioscorea as phytoestrogens or plant estrogens. And of course, when you say that, it immediately makes people freak out, and they make all kinds of judgments and draw all kinds of conclusions. So I want to back up to something I said previously. Humans and plants are not the same. I mean, we know this when we look at each other. We know that plants are not the same. And folks, there are some things in plants which are fantastic and miraculous and wonderful for our health. But make no mistake, a sterol in a plant is not the same as a human estrogen. It is not the same, okay? It can't be. It's a plant, all right? So everybody needs to know that, and just get that out of your head. Get the word phytoestrogen out of your head, or estrogen at all out of your head, okay? So we're going to use the term sterols, plant sterols. That's accurate. And that'll be good for all the regulators all over planet Earth. And remember, we're a global company, so as you're talking to people about plus, you want to use terminology that is legal and compliant in all countries. So if you say plant sterol, you're always, always, always safe, okay? So that's what you want to do when you're describing that. Now, plant sterols, there's a whole kind of category. It's sort of like saying, like amino acids is a nutrition category, and vitamins is a nutrition category. Well, plant sterols are a nutrition category all by themselves. And they are quite remarkable. And it is one of the reasons that human beings really should consume various plants. And the problem we have today is that our diet has changed so much since our ancestors. Our ancestors were hunter-gatherers until really very recent times. If you take the entire history of humanity, and then you take the tiny section where we were not hunter-gatherers, which the modern part of our section, it's a very tiny speck of time in the total of the history of the human race. So throughout most of the human race, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, and whatever the village wise man, medicine man, witch doctor, whatever continent you're on, whatever they would tell them to do, they did it. And nobody questioned it. You just did it because, well, that was the wise man, okay? And there were some cultures in Northern Europe where it was, and you may not know this, where it was the wise woman. It was always a female that they looked to for that. So in most cultures it was male, but in many of the cultures, especially in Northern Europe, it was the wise woman who knew everything about plants, and she knew all the magic and knew all the spells and all that stuff, okay? Well, we're not going to talk about magic and spells. We're here to talk about science. And Dioscorea villosa is amazing, amazing stuff. In fact, if you were to look far beyond, and remember, folks, we have regulatory limitations. There are rules that so that Manitech can't put certain things on labels, can't make certain claims, and science is irrelevant to many regulators. So it's like, this is what we allow, this is not what we allow. It's that kind of thing. But I can tell you right now that if you were to do any degree of study into plant sterols, and if you saw, and I won't get complicated with this, but you can combine sterols in different ways to get a different result. For instance, combining certain sterols in a certain way can actually work as contraceptive pills, which they did now they're totally synthetic. But in the beginning, they were actually made with Dioscorea villosa. And of course, synthetics are more dependable because it's more, synthetics are not food, so they always work exactly the same way, whereas foods always work differently. The body will take what it needs when it needs it and send it to the various parts of the body as it needs it, which I'm going to get to in a moment. So keep that in your head before we get there, okay? So you can look at, for instance, you combine plant sterols in a certain way, and now what you can do is the body makes cortisone more effectively. Well, you use that to help your body in the inflammatory process, so to help you with inflammation. And when you combine certain sterols in a certain way, it helps with cholesterol. And the list goes on. So please don't think in an absolutist sense and think that all plant sterols do this only, and that's it, because that's not the way it works in science, folks. So you can actually take these molecular structures, combine them in different ways, and get different functions. That is super, super cool. Now, our ancient ancestors would see that as magic, but it's just science, okay? So you may, as an example, look up certain plant sterols, the most common plant sterols out there. And by the way, Dioscorea villosa is not the most commonly used plant sterol. And I think that's a big advantage for us at Manitech, because our earliest research guy, who hasn't been with us for almost 20 years now, he's been gone, and I knew him after I came on board, because I came in a year after the company was started. And he looked into this, and he was looking at all kinds of plant sterols to help us with glandular function. And so you can use certain sterols that only help with female reproductive glands, and some that only help with the inflammatory process, or they only help with strength and muscles and whatever, or they only help with cholesterol and so on. There's all these different products out there. But what this first researcher did was he took a look, and this was before Bill McAnally, okay, so you know that. Our very first guy, his name was Bill Fioretti. He was our very first guy. And so Bill was looking at all these, and he said, you know what? I like this Dioscorea villosa stuff because it does more stuff. It doesn't do just one thing. It does a whole bunch of things. And I love this. And this is one of the reasons, and I'll talk to you about some of the mechanisms in a moment, but this is one of the reasons that Plus has been since 1994. It has always been in the top 5 selling products at Manitech every month, every year, for more than 20 years. Why? Because this is our best feel-good product. Now, I know that some of you on the call want product information only. Some of you are business builders, and I'm trying to give all of you a little bit of everything here. If you're a business builder, what you want is a feel-good product. In fact, there is nothing that's going to help you build your business faster than a feel-good product. You don't even have to know the science. You don't have to know all the details from this call. You can say to somebody, here's some of our product called Plus. You take this, and in a week, give me a call. You're going to want more of it. I guarantee it. And it's about a 99% guarantee that just about everybody who uses Plus is going to feel better in a variety of ways. Because of the way this is formulated, it actually supports a number of different glands in the body, not just the female reproductive system. And that's another problem, I would say, that started very early in Manitech history, where we had some associates, and something that I always say. So now this is a Nugent quote. I own this quote, okay? So, but I always say this: in the absence of fact, people create fiction, and that is the case. So way back when, people didn't understand how this worked. They were looking up stuff in books and so on, and they were making up fictions, and they said things like, "Oh, well, Plus is a woman's product. And so men don't bother with this, but you women, you need to take this because this is what every woman needs." And of course, they were thinking about the female reproductive system and the often terrible challenges that some women go through once a month. I mean, really terrible challenges. And as a man, I can only attempt to have sympathy. I obviously can't have empathy. But and that's a mistake. This is not just a woman's product. Do women love this product? Boy, you better believe it. You better believe it. In fact, one Mannatech husband I talked to once, he said he considers this a happy marriage product because things are so much better at home when his wife uses Plus. That's a very small amount of humor. But this is so true, because if you keep those hormones balanced, and balance, folks, balance is the key to wellness. Every time I see stuff on various websites and product information, and they're talking about stimulating this and stimulation is not wellness. Now, sometimes it's fun, but balance is wellness. That's what we always want. And what's wonderful about these plant sterols is that they help multiple glands in the body, not one, but multiple glands, to achieve balance. So is it a good thing? Obviously, if there are female reproductive imbalances and you give your body the sterols that can help you achieve that balance, yeah, of course it's a good thing. You know it. And this is if we look at various cultures, hunter-gatherer cultures, and there aren't many left, as you know, there are very few left that have not been really tainted by modern society. For instance, the Aboriginals there in Australasia, and as well as the Maoris in New Zealand, they are so far away from their original tribal customs and behaviors that we can no longer really consider them hunter-gatherer tribes. And there's only a handful that are still left that have almost no contact with modern society. But if you go to them and you look at their diets and then you ask them about their health problems, what's really remarkable is how little they have in common with the rest of the world in terms of health. In most cases, they're so much healthier. They're so much happier. And in many cases, their tribal languages don't even have words to describe things like the often terrible things that women have to go through once a month. Some of these tribes don't even have words to describe that. Why? Because they don't have that. I mean, yes, they go through the cycle once a month, but they don't have all the tribulations that women are having in modern society. Why? Because they're feeding their bodies where they're supposed to. We're supposed to eat certain plant substances every day that we simply don't do anymore. As an example, it is believed, and there's no way to absolutely confirm this, we can only go with current hunter-gatherer tribes, but it is believed that our ancestors probably consumed about 400 milligrams of plant sterol in their daily diet. Now, in the modern diet, according to one of the most recent studies I've seen, we were looking at somewhere between 1 and 3 milligrams on average per person per day in the modern diet. So clearly our diets have changed, and that has to affect our health. And so this is not about quality of food. This is about choices in the food that you're going to eat. Now, again, most plant sterols are nasty. I mean, they're bitter, and some of them are super bitter. If you were to bite into a Plus tablet, you probably would not like that taste at all. And if you do like the taste, I'm concerned for you because it's simply not a taste treat. That's why we put it in the caplet form, okay? And we chose a caplet versus a capsule because there aren't capsules big enough to compress that much material into, and a caplet you can press it down tighter. So that's why it's in that. Has nothing to do with how you digest it. That's another fiction created by who knows who years ago in early Manitech history. Has nothing to do with that. It's simply we had a certain amount of material we wanted everybody to have every day, and the only way to get it there was to compress it into a caplet. That's it. That's all. Nothing more complicated. Now, what do we know about sterols in general in terms of glandular function? Well, besides the female reproductive part, which we've talked about, there's also male reproductive support. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. I take Plus every day. I don't take Plus primarily for supporting some of the other things that I'm going to tell you about, which are all benefits. I take Plus primarily to support my prostate gland because it's a gland. And what plant sterols do is they provide you with the basic food so that your gland is fed correctly, and then that gland has the possibility of making its hormones correctly. Think of every gland of your body as though that gland was a machine. And the job of that machine was to create a product, and the product is a hormone or a variety of hormones, depending on the gland, of course. Well, the machine has to be fueled, and the fuel includes certain vitamins and certain minerals, which, by the way, are unique to each gland. So every gland doesn't have the same vitamins and the same mineral requirements. It's unique to each gland. That's number one. And all the glands are going to require omega-3 because the plant sterols don't complete their chain of reactions, if you will, if there's not enough omega-3 for them to get that done. So omega-3 is something I always, always, always recommend when you use plus, because you want to maximize the plus. You want that plus to work as well as it can for you, which it simply can't biochemically. It's simply not possible unless you have enough omega-3 to get that job done. Okay? So that's what I use plus for every day, because, after you pass the age of 40, and I'm a few days past the age of 40, so, and after you pass the age of 40 and you're a male, then you have to say, oh, I better start thinking about that old prostate gland. And of course, the older you get, the more you better start thinking about it. And hopefully, most of you have been thinking about it at an earlier age than that. But the older a man gets, the more a man will have a natural, this is not disease related, this is age related, okay? It is a natural age related process that the prostate gland begins to enlarge or swell with age. It's normal, it's natural, it just happens as you age. Now, for some men, it's worse than others, and it depends on your genetics, it depends on your diet, it depends on all kinds of things. But with this in mind, this is called benign prostate hypertrophy, which is not a disease, okay? It's benign. There's no disease involved. It's just a natural swelling of the gland. Now, men, if you want to keep, and ladies, you care about your men, so listen carefully. The prostate gland needs to have plant sterols. Yes, it does. And it needs to have zinc. And it needs to have magnesium. And it needs to have selenium. In fact, the favorite selenium for me would be selenomethionine. Guess what would be great for your men? Well, how about plus and catalyst, so that you've got your magnesium, your zinc, and your selenium in ample levels to help support a healthy prostate gland. You combine that with omega-3 and the plus, and boy, you have got a winning team right there. Now, for women, for the female reproductive glands, again, I would suggest catalyst, because women also need especially a significant amount of magnesium. And of all of our products, the one that has the highest level of magnesium is catalyst. So catalyst with plus and omega-3 for ladies. Wow, that sounds simple. So men and women should be doing the same thing there. How cool is that? All right, what if you want to support the other glands of the body? Now, again, each of the gland has its individual requirements for certain vitamins and certain minerals, and by the way, certain amino acids as well. But most people in the modern diet are not deficient in amino acids. That's kind of rare to see that happening in the modern diet, because amino acids are found abundantly in meat, chicken, fish, any kind of animal product. And then, of course, if you're using our True Health, then you're getting aminos from the protein there. So, but anyway, you're unlikely to be deficient in amino acids, very unlikely. But you may not be getting enough omega-3, and you may not be getting enough magnesium and other nutrients which are necessary for glandular function. Your most important gland in the body is, in terms of overall function. Now, this is not, I'm not talking about the master gland. Your master gland is called the pituitary gland. That's what's well, really the hypothalamus gland is the absolute master gland. But the gland that's driving your thyroid and so on is the anterior pituitary. Okay. We're not going to get into all that complexity. Okay. It's too much for a call this short. Let's talk about the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are called that because they are literally added to the renal glands. That's how they get their name. Now, most people call the renal glands kidneys, but they're called renal glands. So the adrenal glands are added to. They're literally mounted right on top of the kidneys. They're the size of a pretty healthy strawberry, I guess, would be a good way to describe it size-wise in most people. But they are amazing. I mean, these are tiny, tiny little glands, literally. I mean, if you're comparing them to other glands of the body. And they are creating the most powerful chemicals in your entire body. I mean, they are astounding what they do. You've heard stories, as an example, of, and I don't know if these stories are true, okay, but everybody's heard these stories where, there's a child caught underneath a car and a mother, desperately to save the child, lifts up a Beetle Volkswagen, okay? I don't know if that's true or not, but you hear these stories. The idea is that the adrenal glands give you this stuff called adrenaline. And when the adrenaline surges into your bloodstream, it gives you incredible strength, incredible alertness, and just sort of super vibrance, if you will, okay? Now, small amounts of adrenaline do less, and big amounts of adrenaline do more, okay? So you understand that. But adrenaline is only one of many powerful chemicals created by your adrenal glands. Those little glands still need to be fed. All the glands, remember again, all the glands need plant sterol. They all do. And all the glands need omega-3 with the plant sterol to make it work well. So there's another reason why I don't care what you're after. I don't care if you're looking for supporting your adrenals or supporting the reproductive glands or whatever you're after. You still take omega-3. You make sure you take your omega-3 and your plus, of course. Now, there are other chemicals. For instance, there are chemicals from the adrenal glands that can elevate your mood. They make you feel happier, as well as stronger, as well as more alert, as well as more energetic. I mean, people think of the thyroid as the energy gland. The adrenal glands are working 24/7. I mean, those little glands work harder than any other glands in the body. Thyroid works on demand, basically, but the adrenals are those poor little things are just pumping around the clock. In fact, when you're having a dream, they're pumping, okay? And because they're physically reacting to what you're mentally experiencing. So they are crucial for your physical and your psychological health, as well as your physical and psychological energy. They're crucial. So if you want to feel better overall, both physically and psychologically, you want your adrenal glands to be as healthy as they can possibly be. That should make sense to everybody. So then, when I first was introduced to Plus, and that was back in 1995, and I looked at the chemistry of it, and I thought, well, I can see that a lot of hormones might be supported here. And I started giving Plus as a sort of test to people who were very fatigued. And most of them were very fatigued because their adrenal glands were just pooped. And do you use that word in Australasia? Yeah, okay. All right, good. And so, I mean, we're just pooped out. And so I had tried other things for these patients. It wasn't doing much for them. Helped them a little bit. Like I gave them B12 injections and that would pick them up for a few days, but that didn't get the job done. But then when I started giving them these plant sterols in Plus, they started reporting that they were feeling better energy-wise, feeling better physically, feeling better psychologically. And what I heard so often, and I've heard all these years with Plus, is I don't know why, but I just feel good. when I take it, I just feel better. And if I don't take it, I know that I'm not taking it. I don't feel well. Okay. So a lot of it is about the adrenal glands. Now, your adrenal glands are backup glands. Okay. So yes, they have certain primary functions, but when you have another gland that isn't functioning very well, they try and work harder to back you up. And this puts a lot of stress on the poor little things. So sometimes they need to be fed more. That should make sense. So we have people who will say, well, how much plus should I take? And I always have to say, I don't know. I don't know because it's going to be different for you than it will be for me. Because we all have different requirements, as well as this is related to your age, it's related to your genetics, it's related to your gender, to your general diet, to your psychological stress levels, and so on. So I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you that generally speaking, some people do very well with a single tablet. I personally take 2 tablets twice a day. I frequently see people who take more than that. And let's dispel another myth here. So often, once again, in the absence of fact, people create fiction. So often I have people who will come to me and say, well, Plus was making my neighbor feel good, but I kept taking, wasn't making me feel good. Now I'm taking 12 a day, and now I feel good. Well, then my first question to them always is, are you taking omega-3? Very often the answer was no. Or do you take sufficient levels of magnesium and zinc? And very often the answer is no. So I would get them to take Catalyst as well as Plus and omega-3. And very often things would turn around pretty quick and they wouldn't need 12 a day anymore. Now perhaps 2 a day, perhaps 4 a day, rather than 12 a day. Now, folks, I want your body to have everything it needs every day. But I also don't want you to spend more money than you need to spend. So I would rather see you feeding multiple systems and parts of your body, making sure you're taking your Catalyst and your omega-3 with your Plus, than see you having 12 plus a day. Okay? I mean, that just should make sense for everybody. Okay. So when you want to feed the adrenal glands, you also, for the adrenals, they need a lot more B vitamin than most glands do. They need B6, they need B5, they need B1. And what product is our best source of the B vitamins in the Manitech inventory? Well, let me see. It's Catalyst. Okay, so Catalyst, and I was just trying to get everybody to think for a moment, right? Okay, so Catalyst, again, sometimes people take Catalyst and they don't even need to do anything else before their adrenal glands pick up. But you definitely want to make sure that if fatigue is a problem for you, first of all, see your physician, get some blood tests done, and find out if there's any underlying problem with the fatigue other than simply nutritional problems, because sometimes there is, and make sure you rule that out. That's a responsible thing to do, folks. But in most cases, the average person with fatigue is not that they're really unhealthy, they're just not giving their glands and their systems the food that they need to cope with their daily stresses every day. Okay? So again, your winning combination, those 3 things, again, Plus, Catalyst, omega-3. Now, some people will say, well, what about my thyroid? Well, what about your thyroid? A lot of people, they don't know much about the other glands at all. And so they tend to put everything on the thyroid gland. And then if they go to their physician and they do a blood test and the physician says either your thyroid is normal, so this is all in your head, or your thyroid is not normal and here, take this drug. Okay. Well, the thyroid gland also has specific requirements. It requires certain minerals that the adrenals don't require, and there's a crossover on vitamin where it does require B6, but it doesn't require the same vitamins then, other than B6, that the adrenals do. Well, once again, you cover all your vitamin needs with Catalyst. You're all set. So you don't have to worry about, well, which vitamins for this, which vitamins for that. You just take your catalyst, just everybody does. Okay, it's that simple. Now, when you give the thyroid the right vitamins and the right minerals, now again, the thyroid gland, it requires a mineral called manganese as well as selenium. And manganese is not magnesium. Don't get the two confused. They're very different minerals, okay? And then you say, well, gosh, am I getting enough of that? Well, if you're taking your catalyst, you probably are, all right? So that's what you do there. So does a thyroid gland need plant sterols? Of course it does. All of the glands need to be fed with plant sterol, okay? So then, what I'm kind of saying to all of you to make this simple, I mean, I've given you a lot of details to help your understanding and to help your confidence, because I want all of you to be absolutely confident when you go out to talk to another person about our products. And to do that, I think you need more information to build that confidence, okay? But simply, to make things simple, because folks, in today's world, it is getting to the point where I think that we as a society, okay, the collective we, are actually training people to have shorter attention spans. Attention spans are getting shorter every year. And as they get shorter, commercial entities, in order to be competitive, keep making their material shorter, which makes people's attention span shorter. People become less patient, and they can't stay focused. So you don't want to give complicated answers to people, folks. You just don't. Keep it simple. So plant sterols are the basic food that feeds the glands. Which gland? All of them. And the other glands also need, of course, omega-3 and a variety of vitamins and minerals. Which ones? Don't worry. Just take your catalyst. So you see how simple you can make this for everybody. So we're looking at all kinds of hormonal complaints, glandular-related complaints, that can actually get a whole lot better simply by feeding your body in the healthiest possible way. And it's super, super simple. Now, I did mention one thing earlier that I haven't covered yet, so I'll pop back to that for a second before we close up this call. I did mention cholesterol. We do have, in some countries, we have heart health related claims. In some countries, we have blood lipid, or lipid means fats. Okay, so blood fat related claims. And I'm sorry, but I don't recall if those are approved in Australasia or not. But let me explain this to you quickly, regardless, because we are a global company. And because our associates talk to each other virtually instantaneously now through telephone texts, and so people are sharing information, and they may not know which rules are compliant in which countries. You may have the conversation, so I'm just going to explain to you how it works, and then we'll check later on and see if this is these are approved claims for Australasia. I'm not sure. Okay, we know that certain plant sterols actually do help to achieve and maintain normal healthy levels of cholesterol or normal healthy levels of triglyceride. Now, very quickly, to help you understand, cholesterol is a thing that's made of mostly triglyceride. And triglyceride, there are several different types of triglycerides, but the bad kind is actually made by your liver. So in other words, eating cholesterol doesn't raise your cholesterol. Eating things that cause your body to produce bad triglyceride raises your cholesterol. At least 75% of all the cholesterol that's found in anybody's body at any given minute was made in their own liver. It wasn't eaten in a food. And how does this work? If you eat a food which is high glycemic, that means a food that raises your blood sugar sharply, which causes you to have an insulin reaction. If you do that, your liver will take that high glycemic food and turn it into triglyceride, and triglyceride is more than 70% of the total composition of a cholesterol molecule. So in other words, if you control your triglyceride, you control your cholesterol. And that same bad triglyceride, there are good triglycerides too, but that same bad triglyceride is the stuff that hangs on our body that we call fat. It's exactly the same triglyceride. This is why on the True Health System, I tell everybody, eat low glycemic foods. Well, you don't just do it to improve your body composition, like Sinead has done such a fabulous, fantastic job of. You do it for your overall health and especially for your heart health. Because obviously, if you're not making that nasty stuff in your liver, then you don't have the stuff to clog up your arteries, do you? So that's a pretty cool thing. Now, we'll check and see if that claim is available, and then Sinead will get back to all of you because I'm not sure if it's available in Australasia or not. But I wanted you to understand that there are plant sterols that if you take the sterols before you eat your meal or just while you eat your meal, that you may find that it is supporting normal, healthy levels of blood lipids. That's the best way I can say it, I think, to be as compliant as we can be. So understand what I just said. Before you eat your meal or while you're eating your meal, okay? Now, when you do it after you eat your meal, there is a slightly different function. And this is not to say that there isn't crossover. There is crossover, okay? So don't think in absolutes. It doesn't absolutely always happen 100% this way or that way, okay? So there are some crossovers. But generally speaking, if you're concerned about cardiovascular health, you may want to take your plus just before you eat or even when you eat, okay? So just give you that little tidbit, all right? And that kind of is the sort of overall summary of why Plus is such good stuff. And I'll tell you, I remember back in 1995, Mannatech was growing like a weed. Wow, is it growing? And almost all of the growth was due to Plus. I mean, people were going out, they were sampling Plus. And they were just saying to their friends, you know what? Here's a bottle of Plus. You just take this, and I guarantee you're going to want some more. And our company went from, if you can imagine this, we had this skyrocketing effect starting in 1994 at $0. And by mid-1995, $423 million earnings, just skyrocketing. And that's more than double what our company makes today globally in 26 countries. And we were doing that only in the US. Why? People were focused on Plus. There is something to be said for simplicity, my friends, to keep if you're a business builder, to keep your business building approach as simple as you can. Don't try and complicate it with lots of science. Don't try to impress people with everything that you know. They have a question, you have an answer. That's how you build it. How simple is that? They say, I have this, I feel that, I feel this, and you respond by saying, you know what? I think you should try some Plus. And by the way, to really make this work, the trifecta, the triumvirate, the three products that'll really do this for you, what's it going to be? Well, it's going to be Plus, Catalyst, and Omega-3.